So here we have, man, a blunt. Cannabis.
For 420 this year, I set out to make a film about how awesome cannabis legalization is for the world. Then I met Aaron.
You right? Speeding over here, all sound going?
80 plus years, this could get me locked up in prison, but today I can sit here and enjoy it, so we're gonna enjoy.
This is the moment the story changed.
And just so you guys know, this is off the street cannabis. I refuse to buy weed from the legal system. I won't do it. I can't do it.
Why wouldn't somebody buy weed from the legal market?
Why don't I participate in the legal market? I do not agree with how the legal market was set up in the very beginning. From the word go, it was never set up to address who it used to harm and who it still harms to this day.
I quickly learned that simple word legalization was a lot more complicated than I first thought. For most of human history, cannabis was legal and widely used across the world. Until the early 1900s, when something started to go very wrong.
The Treasury Department intends to pursue a relentless warfare against the despicable, dope-peddling vulture who preys on the weakness of his fellow man.
On the heels of the 21st Amendment, America's top prohibition cop, Harry Anslinger, was named the head of the newly formed Federal Bureau of Narcotics.
This ceaseless fight against the drug traffic is directed by the Department of Narcotics, Washington.
With alcohol re-legalized, there weren't many bootleggers or speakeasies to go after. Cocaine and heroin didn't have enough users, so worried he'd be out of a job, Harry was looking to invent a new public enemy. An enemy that would give him an excuse to go after the two groups he hated the most: addicts and ethnic minorities. In 1937, in the spirit of paternalistic alcohol prohibition, he invented a ban on what he dubbed marijuana.
Join me. Would you be seated, please, ladies and gentlemen? America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive.
Nixon added to the list of targets the counterculture movement, which was made up largely of anti-war protesters and hippies who took pride in resisting paternalism. Marijuana activism was born. Despite the all-out war, drug use still wasn't going down as politicians had promised. After all, the 60s and the 70s were the heyday of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, especially in the US. To expand his reach, Nixon set his sights on the international community. Despite the mounting evidence to the contrary, the United States began an international crusade, strong-arming other countries into criminalizing cannabis, whether they wanted to or not.
This will be a worldwide offensive, and it will be nationwide.
Simultaneously, the US continued laying a domestic foundation for a massive and overwhelming system of oppression.
Talk to me about the war on drugs. What does that mean to you? Like when you hear the word war on drugs, what is that?
War on drugs was a war on black men. There's nobody in my era or age group that was not affected by the drug war. And I don't care if it was you sold drugs, you didn't sell drugs, and then you have a system going over to legalization. They should have addressed some of this, and it didn't, and then here we talk, and everybody wants to know, well, it was great for the black community. Okay, show me where.
With the discovery of CBD, the medical marijuana movement picked up steam. Countries like Canada and Portugal started to buck the US-backed international treaties. Even some US states began to defy the federal government.
Colorado and Washington state legalized recreational use of marijuana.
The 50-year-long battle for marijuana legalization, which started in the 60s, was coming to fruition. Activists and the counterculture movement would finally get the proof that they needed to show that the drug war was not only useless, but also harmful. Yet, at the same time, despite legalization, somehow the drug war continued.
Seems like you're for cannabis legalization.
Fully for legalization.
Yeah, but there's some things that went wrong in the process.
Yeah, that's it. So, I am fully for legalization and was fully for legalization in the beginning with the idea going in, and I think everybody's idea was that it would do something to benefit the black community.
Legalization came with some strings attached, stopping the victims of the war on drugs from gaining entry into the newly formed marketplace. Written right into cannabis legislation, the war on drugs wages on.
The first thing using the state of Washington did was you couldn't have a felony. Felony is code word for, if this was Jim Crow, no blacks allowed. You couldn't be married to a person with a felony. So then when could anybody in the black community get in? Because again, the mass effects of the war on drugs. Then let's get past that part. It was capital. You had to go through an IRS background check, fingerprinting, and they wanted to know where your money was. Well, who black wasn't gonna get over scrutinized, right? Third one was land. There's no land for anybody to open up a business. We don't have uncles and aunts with land, right? Like, that doesn't exist because of redlining, because of the systems that were set up in place, right? So, okay, felonies, which we know were created through policy, capital, which you know access to capital is controlled through policy, and then land, which we know which controlled through policy. Let's pump the brakes on the three that we can see off top and go to the trauma. You were just chasing me down with SWAT gear, helicopters, tanks, but now you're telling me, oh, no, go ahead, you're good. You can get into the legal cannabis game. Who believes that, right?
Through regulatory barriers and trauma, the system Anslinger and Nixon built continues to do their dirty work. The war on drugs never really was a war on drugs. It was always a war on people.
Let's address some of these issues and make it a fully inclusive system. It doesn't have to even be based on race. Make it a fully inclusive system, meaning the small guy with a closet can get in, right? He shouldn't be denied that opportunity, or she should be denied that opportunity. Allow it to be smoke cafes, rooms like this, where you can sit down and allow them to consume cannabis, and I believe that that's an easier path for black people and victims of war on drugs to get in.
If you are systematically excluded from the supply chain, why would you want to support it? While legalization ended prohibition for many, it restricted the economic opportunities for those who were most harmed by the evils of the drug war. It's time to open up the cannabis industry like never before. Legalization is not only a necessary first step, but a good one.
Legislation and policy created this situation. Legislation and policy has to fix this situation.
We can advocate for a fair system that ends the harmful ramifications of the war on drugs. That change starts with you. We have to remove the stigma around pot consumption, sales, and cultivation.
Can I get a puff?
Please do. It's a little rough. I just recently started smoking backwoods, but if you guys want to share it around, go for it. Yeah, exactly. Everybody have at it. Everybody have at it. Absolutely.
Speed all day is the first time I get smoked.
See? That's what happens, man, when they go